Just when they said nothing new ever happens in family law, here we go with a major announcement and a major new development that is going to knock your socks off. And if it doesn't knock your socks off, once you actually look at the financial affidavit, it might knock everything off. Here we go. In June of 2025, wow, that's just about a month ago, the Florida Supreme Court and the Florida legislature have done it again. They've essentially revolutionized Florida family law. This is no small thing. Change takes eons to happen. It rarely happens. And finally, in the span of essentially 2 years, we've had law changes that were 100 years in the making. With the new Florida Family Law Financial Affidavit, there are new provisions, expansions of old provisions, and some things have been subtracted. What I want to do is highlight some things that already exist and some things that are expansions of those things that already exist in a way, shape, or form. As you may know, with the long form financial affidavit, if you have business income, you generally have to attach a sheet itemizing the income. One of the better ways to do this is at a minimum with what we call a profit and loss statement. Now, with rental income, the Florida long form financial affidavit now asks you to itemize rental income minus necessary expenses. Reimbursed income, including payments received from somewhere else. For instance, if you're living at your parents' house, if you're living at your new spouse's house, gains derived from dealing in property. Now, somebody that is unsophisticated, and I do not mean that to mean lacking in knowledge, but maybe not quite as nuanced in their interpretation, might interpret that provision for non-recurring gains, which are included in it, to mean only when you have your house, rather than when you buy, sell, lease, otherwise rent property commercially, or if you do so residentially. I interpret that section to include pretty much everything. What else do we have, since we have so many fascinating new things? Well, we have, you're going to love this, communication and technology and remote working subscriptions now. Subscription streaming services. This means Zoom, Amazon, Netflix, YouTube, NFL Plus, Peacock, everything you can imagine. Service contracts and appliances. I do not remember seeing that before. I wonder if that one was already in there. What else do we have? Automobile subscription and roadside services, such as AAA, for example. Or if you purchase through Toyota, it might be a separate service, or Lexus, or what have you. These sorts of provisions can cost money. Everything and anything that could conceivably be construed as an ordinary and necessary daily expense. Continuing, I think we always had non-prescription medication, supplements, and vitamins. I believe the section is new for psychiatric, psychological, and counselor, that it's specifically stated that way. And I like that because it tells the other parent, if you have kids, what exactly is going on there. Because that's under the monthly expenses for minor children common to both parties section. Sometimes, when you have shared parenting, one parent sends the kids to a counselor, the other parent doesn't necessarily know that, and that could be used for purposes of fact witnesses and eventually an expansion on that for expert witnesses at a hearing or trial. Continuing, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. I do not recall that from before, and if some of these are duplicates or redundant and I'm just restating it, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure paying attention to it now. This is really fascinating. Costs required to exercise time sharing, such as supervised visitation, travel, and lodging expenses. I interpret that to be limited more so than it sounds, because that could be for anything. Having words in parentheses usually means including, not limited to. So I think that that one's problematic. That probably should have been given more careful consideration, because anybody having time sharing has to travel in some way, shape, or form, including taking off early from work. And then what are we talking about here? Okay, but in this particular case, number 60 probably refers to long distance time sharing when you have to pay for airline tickets, drive 12 hours, pay for train tickets, and any means of transportation for you to visit your children. other subscription services. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the OnlyFans provision. If you are subscribing to OnlyFans or some sort of other service, well, that's a subscription service. And even though the Florida Supreme Court might not want to mention something that borders on the illicit or the lewd or the lascivious, this financial affidavit suggests that you are supposed to provide that information. Okay. Is there anything else here specifically that I find really fascinating? Tobacco, alcohol, and vaping. I think vaping is new, and if it's not, shame on me. But that certainly is interesting because that is the new thing, and that costs a small fortune of money to continue. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about this new financial affidavit, we talk about, my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't even mention to you cryptocurrency. That was my favorite part. I meant to bring it first, and somehow I did not. The new Florida Financial Family Law Affidavit asks you about your EFT wallets, your cryptocurrency. It asks you to provide information that usually you had to move mountains to do, that sometimes you would have to go into a request for production of documents. And that request for production of documents could be costly. So, this new Florida Family Law Financial Affidavit tries to cover everything, all manner of sin. It tries to get at everything without making the discovery process a giant work of torture.